The Carolina Hurricanes remain undefeated to start the 25-26 season after a successful shark hunt at the tank on Tuesday night. Brandon Bussi went in his debut, and the Hurricanes ran amok on the Sharks. We're going to talk all about that here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
Your Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surge Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. For the Wednesday edition of the show, we are going to be talking about Brandon Bussi and how great he showed out in his debut win for the Hurricanes, saving 16 of 17 shots against the Sharks to win in his NHL debut after playing 111 AHL games within the Bruins organization. Also going to talk about the Hurricanes overall in this win as they take a dominant 5-1 win over the Sharks to start the road trip 1-0 and stay 3-0 on the season. And then later on, we get to hear from Rod Brind'Amour postgame and get his thoughts on the Hurricanes when following that game on Tuesday night against the Sharks, which was a very good night, all things considered, for the Canes when it came to how they played on that night. But before we jump into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, like I said, the Carolina Hurricanes come into the Shark Tank 2-0 on the season. And for Brandon Bussi, it was his first NHL game after playing 111 American League hockey games with the Boston Bruins organization. And you guys heard me talk about him on the Tuesday show leading up into the preview of the fact that he had some really good numbers in the postseason, even really good numbers in the regular season as well. But unfortunately, just kind of had a up and down Providence Bruins roster in front of him, like sub 3 goals against, decent 900 save percentages across the board records. I think, only speak a little bit of the volume of what they've done, but you can tell something was there. And I think when it comes to just where he was at the time for Brandon Bussi, it was kind of tough for him to really crack into a Bruins lineup that had a bunch of goalies ahead of him. But I think overall, when you look at where he is in, 27 years old, just trying to find an opportunity. And I think that's what the Hurricanes gave him because, when you kind of look into all that, it's interesting that when you hear from the Hurricanes organization about how they were really looking at Brandon Bussi at the time, and this is a good thing that you hear from Paul Schoenfelder, and of course this is from Ryan Henkel, was talking to him, before Bussi's debut. Paul Schoenfelder said he was somebody I identified in the summertime. He obviously ended up signing in Florida, but he was someone who was on my list of people to go after. I had him down as somebody who was ready to make that jump to the NHL. I feel that's where his game is at right now. That says enough right there for you that when you look at goaltending coach Paul Schoenfelder, who's, has been someone who's coached Freddie Anderson, Pierre Kochetkov, now, Ronta, Spencer Martin, Dustin Tokarski, he's been here for a long time. He's seen a lot of goalies go through the Hurricane system. And to see that the fact that the Hurricanes got Kane Primo, they were looking forward to having him. Unfortunately, got picked up on waivers. But then the Hurricanes were able to pick up Bussi because he had to go through waivers himself. And Paul Schoenfelder, give him a lot of credit to see, where he's at in his game to get the Hurricanes to be like, let's go claim this guy. He's that good. And just overall in this game, huge saves early on to keep the Hurricanes 1-0, 1-1 at some points. And like I said, when you hear the stats, like, okay, but it's only 16 to 17 shots, but it's like, still though, that's pretty huge for a guy to come in first time ever, have a .941 save percentage in his debut when only allowing one goal, and it was off of a turnover that the Sharks were able to capitalize on with a goal from Eklund. That still says a lot for a guy to come in. He's been with the team for maybe over a week. Like, the Hurricanes picked him up not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. You're talking October 5th that the Hurricanes claimed Bussi off of waivers, makes the opening night roster, was supposed to be the third goalie, all things considered, but then Pierre Kachekhov's out. So now he's the backup to Freddie Anderson. And you look at this game where, all right, start of a 6-game, 12-day trip on the road for the State Fair trip. And it's like, okay, here's your NHL debut against the Sharks. Now, people could say, oh, well, it's only the Sharks. They're not the greatest roster ever. Yeah, they're a very young roster, but they have, some veterans on there as well, Leddy, Lindbergh, Toffoli, and stuff like that. So, while there's a youth movement going on in San Jose, there's still some guys who can score on that roster. And for the fact that he came in first NHL game ever and put on a performance like that, a lot of key saves, almost had an assist himself in his debut on the goal that Eric Robinson scored. But even then, and you guys have been hearing me saying this over the last few episodes, I'm fine with Brandon Bussi being in the net for the Hurricanes if they have to go use him if Kochetkov's out for partial of this road trip or maybe the whole road trip, who knows. And because I know a lot of people are kind of, nervous, like, okay, who's our third goalie now? Is he going to be good? Because, everyone saw how good Kane Primo was. And for me, I think Bussi is very underrated when you look at him, how he did in the Bruins organization. Because I covered him a little bit last year for Caller Times as the Providence Bruins are, just because of the availability for being the Wolves guy wasn't really there. But seeing his game, I knew that he was someone that could, if he ever got the opportunity, I think he can claim a chance or make a case for him to be someone to rely on if the Hurricanes need him as a third goalie, and he showed out for that in this game. And it makes you feel kind of good. Like, okay, this is his debut win, regardless of who it is, because of the NHL nowadays, anyone can beat anyone. So I would not say, oh, well, it was a poor or a low-end Sharks team. It doesn't matter. NHL teams can beat anyone at this point. And I think for the Hurricanes, getting him in there to give him an opportunity, okay, we got the Sharks, we got the Ducks, let's see how you do before we throw you to the Wolves, essentially, with probably the big boys, if that comes to the case, because the Hurricanes have a lot of tough games coming at the back end of this road trip. So they want to see where they're at with Brandon Bussi, because you don't want to throw this guy out to Vegas, Colorado, Dallas in your first NHL game as a debut. You see how you do. You kind of want to ease him into it, and I think regardless of who it was, or if it was Tuesday night against the Sharks or Thursday night against the Ducks, you have to feel pretty good if you're Carolina and looking at this being like, okay, we see what we have in this guy. Huge saves in his debut win. 16 of 17 saves. You go, like I said, a .941 save percentage. You go out and secure winning your debut. That's a huge statement from Brandon Bussi to be able to go do that. And it helps, too, that the Hurricanes in front of him did their jobs. Great defense overall. And limiting the Sharks to 17 shots, none in the third period, that does help a long way, too, for the fact that they didn't let, their, essentially rookie goalie get absolutely shelled in his first game. That says a lot to where this Hurricanes team is at compared to the past, where it's like, how are you going to do in a debut game for your goalie, and you're playing a lesser opponent, not trying to be disrespectful to the Sharks, but then milestones. Jordan Staal in his 900th game as a Carolina Hurricane. Mike Riley is in his first game for the Hurricanes as well. Mark Jankowski makes his season debut. So there was a lot for the Carolina Hurricanes that how does this game look last year? But I think there's a sense of a different feeling for the Hurricanes to start the season and be able to have a good performance like that in front of Bussi really helps, and for the fact that for your netminder, you get your NHL debut win, and you do it in a pretty good fashion. Now, that being said, how did the Carolina Hurricanes do in front of Brandon Bussi in this one? Well, stick around. We'll talk about it on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever really touching a spreadsheet. So don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% of your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, you kind of heard me talk about Brandon Bussi and his win for the Carolina Hurricanes, 16-17 saves, 941 save percentage, why it was, good to put him out there against the Sharks to get a kind of a feel for him, but also to give credit to the team in front of him. Limiting the Sharks to 17 shots the entire game, 0 in the third period, which is pretty dang impressive, all things considered, the fact that the Hurricanes were able to do that. And, of course, for Walt Ruff, it's the 8th time in franchise history they've held an opponent to 0 shots in a period. That's pretty dang impressive when you look at that and the fact that the Hurricanes were able to hold the Sharks to 0 shots in the third period while out shooting them 43-17, 14-8 in the first, 19-9 in shots in the second, 10-0 in the third. It's pretty easy to get a win when you hold your opponents to 0 shots in the third period and basically put this thing out of reach pretty dang early, especially the fact that 3 of the Hurricanes' 5 goals came in the second period alone. But face-off percentage, Hurricanes did a great job, 55.6%, no surprise there. Did get out hit, did have less block shots against the Sharks, but did take care of the takeaways and all that. The penalty kill still did pretty good. I know they're kind of a slower start than usual for the Hurricanes, but now they haven't given up a lot of penalties, so that's why their number is a little bit low. I think it was like 8% coming into this game. But the PK unit does their job, going a perfect 5 for 5 on Tuesday night against the Sharks. However, the power play did go 0 for 3, so there's still only have 1 power play goal for the start of the season. But it's still early on. Things could definitely change. But a lot of guys scoring their first goals of the season on Tuesday night. Sean Walker gets his first. William Carey gets his first, along with Shane Gostisbehere and Jackson Blake. But overall, just a good night for the Hurricanes in general. Like, you look at Keandre Miller, comes in, and it's his first time on the top, defensive pairing with Jacob Slavin out. And, the Hurricanes did say that he's probably going to be out for a little while. They don't know when he's going to get back, but you look at, all right, let's see how Keandre Miller does in his, in this game, top time with Sean Walker, and honestly, all things considered, those guys did a pretty good job. I mean, Sean Walker, 21 minutes and 44 seconds of ice time, along with Keandre Miller's 22-32. Both those guys getting 29 shifts each. But how about this? They combined for 5 shots, Sean Walker having 3. Walker had 2 blocks and 2 hits, while Miller had a block and a hit as well. Every guy on the defense was either a +1 or a +2 in this game, and they all had a point outside of Keandre Miller. Miller was the only one on the defense who didn't get a point, but every other guy on the defense got a point at least. Gostisbehere and Walker both with goals, sensational ones to say the least. And then you look at Chatfield, Ryan, and Keeshan all with assists. And you look at the forward core. You got Mark Jankowski in his first game of the season. Did pretty good, all things considered, while, coming in for just Kotkaniemi, who's still dealing with wearing a tint and dealing with his eyes and stuff. But, Jankowski did have a block, 16 shifts, only 9 minutes and 40 seconds, but still pretty good, all things considered, for a fact the guy was playing fourth line minutes as the fourth line center. No one on the team was a minus that night. A lot of evens for some of these guys, but a lot of plus ones, plus twos. Even Logan Stakeoven, 2 points on the night, the only multi-point guy, but he finished with a plus 3, 2 assists. What a start to the season for Stakeoven. And I think for looking at that second line, while you're still kind of waiting for Andrei Svechnikov to put up a point, which he was a plus 1, played 13:30 in this game, 16 shifts. You still have to feel pretty good if you're looking Stakeoven and Jackson Blake and look at how they are doing so far this season. Blake gets a goal, makes it 5-0. He had 4 shots in the game. He is shooting at will for the Hurricanes. Of course, he tied that with William Carey, who had 4, Logan Stakeoven, who had 4. Nikolai Ehlers had 5 shots in this game, and unfortunately, Ehlers didn't score, but you could definitely tell that it's there for him as well. But looking at that second line, you're kind of feeling pretty good for the Carolina Hurricanes that, wow, maybe Svetch is having a slow start to begin the 25-26 season. You have to feel pretty good with where Logan Stakeoven and Jackson Blake is on their start to their seasons. Like I said, you look at Stakeoven gets a couple of assists in this game. Jackson Blake scores his first of the year, but he's also got a couple of assists as well. So you can kind of see that second line chemistry already working out for the Hurricanes. Like I said, Blake on that 5th goal of the game with an absolute rocket of a one-timer, blows it right past Alex Nedeljkovic, and he gets on the scoring parade as well. So you can kind of sense that mentality that Blake wanted to bring into the season, just trying to get better himself because he knows he can play in the NHL. Now just trying to build on his game. You can definitely see that. The confidence is very high. He's like, you saw last year he was kind of hesitant to shoot. This year, it's almost green light for Jackson Blake to almost shoot at basically anything at this point. He's very much capitalizing on it. And Logan Stakeoven, too, I'm really impressed with where he's at right now with the Carolina Hurricanes. Like, you're talking 3 games into the season. Second line center, you're kind of trying to feel him out and stuff like that. Face-off percentage was 35.7%, but all things considered, though, still pretty impressive for a guy who's still trying to, kind of get his feet wet of learning, how to be a center full time right now. But it's still early on. Give it a little extra time. I think, Stakeoven can get the face-off percentage a little bit higher. But all in all, you got, your top 6 is pretty much scoring. A lot of the guys, still waiting for Svetch and Ehlers to get on the board, but you still got Jarvis is putting up points. You got Jarvis, Aho, Jarvis are putting up points. Stakeoven and Blake are putting up points. That's what you need. And your depth is scoring too. Like I said, Eric Robinson gets a goal. William Carey gets a goal off of a greasy goal that was in front of the net. And it doesn't matter if it's a perfect shot or a playoff goal shot where it's just you're just trying to fight in the crease. A goal is a goal. It doesn't really matter. But Martinook gets a point. That helps too. So overall, a lot of guys put up points in the night. I think so far it was only Stahl, Ehlers, Svechnikov, Jankowski, and Miller were the only ones that didn't put up a point. So you're talking like 13 of, out of 18 guys, essentially, that put up a point. That's pretty dang good for the Hurricanes to go in and do that. So even when you look at the last couple of games where you've had 10 guys put up points, you almost had, like I said, 15 of 18 guys putting up points on the night against the Sharks. That's pretty dang good to get the confidence going, especially when you are on a start of a road trip that's going to be, like it's said, 12, 13 days long, depending on how you count travel days in the middle of that as well. So that's a good way to start. And regardless if it's against the Sharks, who are still a team that's slowly rebuilding or trying to take those next steps, you get to win the NHL. That's all that really matters. And I think the fact that you start the season 3-0, you start the road trip off 1-0, because like I said, last year they had a sub 500 on the road, and you really want to get a good start to that. I think that's what you saw for the Hurricanes, is that they wanted to start the road trip off on the right foot, and they took care of business, and they did. Now you're 1-0 to start the North Carolina State Fair trip. You're 3-0 to start the season. You get a win in Brandon Bussi's debut, and everyone contributed. Like I said, you got bottom 6 guys scoring. You got top 6 guys scoring. 5 out of your 6 defensemen get points. Like, overall, this was great for the Hurricanes. And like I said, your goalie in his NHL debut as a rookie at 27 years old puts in a wonderful performance, saving 16 of 17 for a .941 save percentage. No matter how you chalk this up, great night for the Hurricanes. Now, what did Rod Brind'Amour say about it? Well, stick around and we'll listen to that and react to Rod Brind'Amour's comments in the postgame here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action, whether if you're watching your actual NFL team or maybe even your fantasy team. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, we talked about Brandon Bussi and his debut one for the Hurricanes. We also talked about how the Carolina Hurricanes pretty much did a good job against the San Jose Sharks, 13 of 18 guys putting up points on the night. Logan Stanko with a multi-point night. A lot of guys doing their jobs in front of Brandon Bussi. But now let's hear from Rod Brind'Amour and see what he thought about the game overall. So without further ado, let's listen to the post-game interview with Brind'Amour right now.
Rod, 13 players from your team on the score sheet tonight. What did you see in this one from your vantage point?
Well, I thought it was really, third period was phenomenal. So that's exactly how you want to play it, when you're ahead. I don't even know if we gave up really anything. So, and we were all over too. So I think, but to your point, everyone contributed tonight. You go down the whole list. And some guys had real good games, but everybody was impactful and great to see. Brandon, getting that first one, he was impactful early on. Made a few huge saves that just makes us able to settle in and got us the win.
I was going to say, for him to be able to perform that way in a game like this, which is crucial to start the road trip, what have you seen just player in person?
Well, we didn't know much about him. I mean, obviously we know how we picked him up kind of last minute, and but we've known of him. Paul, he's always looking about this guy and trying to figure out how to acquire him. It kind of fell in our lap. We got kind of lucky, and obviously it's a great start for him, and hopefully many more.
Jankowski and Riley also enter the lineup. What did you see from each of them?
Yeah, great point. Not to overlook those guys because they hadn't played yet, and Jank's been out, didn't play much in preseason. So I thought he was impactful. Not sure what he ended up on the face-off, but we just started every shift with the puck, which helps. And then Riley made a heck of a play on the Robbie goal. So everybody was contributing tonight, and then that's what we need to have.
Obviously, the loss of Slavin isn't easy, and the penalty kill goes 5 for 5 tonight. How did you see that really in terms of an impact?
Yeah. Well, you're not going to replace that player, and we need him back desperately. But like I said, Ryle steps in. First period we take 3 penalties. That could be the game right there if we don't kill those. The goal was the first star in that, but the other guys did a great job too. And,
big thank you to the Carolina Hurricanes and Rod Brind'Amour as always, and you heard it from him. Talk about Brandon Bussi. What a night from him. Big impact early on. Like I said, helped settle him in, helped settle the team in as well, making some big saves. In the fact you hear Hannah Yates, ask Rod about Brandon Bussi. He's like, hey, we don't really know much about him, and it kind of just fell into our lap with the waiver claims and stuff like that. So they're trying to see where they're at with Bussi. And like I said, you heard me talk about it back in segment 1, what Paul Schoenfelder said, the goaltending coach. He was someone where he felt like Bussi could take his game into the NHL level, and he kind of did that. Like I said, in today's game, anyone can beat anyone. It doesn't matter. Every team's got firepower, and he stood tall. There was no jitters. He was ready to go. And Rod even talked about, when you look at Mike Riley, Mark Jankowski as well, coming, making their, Jankowski with his season debut for the Canes, Mike Riley making his first ever game start with the Hurricanes. And the Rod's like, yeah, I don't overlook those guys because, Riley's been kind of in the press box the first couple of games because he's the 7th defenseman. And Jankowski didn't really play a lot in the preseason. It's kind of the healthy scratch right now with, if KK's in. So for them to come in and contribute the way they did, yeah, maybe it wasn't on the score sheet. Well, I mean, Mike Riley did an assist, so that's pretty huge. But even, for Jankowski, didn't really get on the score sheet, played maybe less than 10 minutes, but those guys did their thing. But the fact that Rod really liked the fact that there was a lot of guys who had really good games, some who had okay games, but overall, you kind of get the sense that Rod was very happy with where this team was in this win against the Sharks, especially in the third period where, the Hurricanes do score a couple. Shane Gostisbehere and Jackson Blake make it 4-1 and then 5-1 to really put this game out of reach. But you also mentioned, too, that you give the Sharks a power play, but you never give them an opportunity to put the puck on the net. He goes 0 shots in the third period against. That tells you this team is rolling at that point where they hold the Sharks to 20 minutes of a nothing burger. You have to feel pretty good about yourselves, and I think it's good to hear from Rod so early on the fact that he's kind of feeling good where this team is at with. You're still waiting for a couple of guys to come along and, make the contributions that you want from them. But overall, I think where the Hurricanes are at, this is a good start to the season. Like I said, you're 3-0. You are in a good spot. While you're still waiting for Ehlers and Svechnikov to come around, you're still getting contributions from Jarvis with an assist, Aho with another assist, Stanko with a couple assists as well. Jackson Blake gets his first goal. So you're getting the rest of your top 4 of your top 6 are really rolling right now to get you the goals and the assists there needed. And your bottom 6 is contributing really well. So I think overall, while you're still waiting from some star players to kind of get going, at least the rest of the team is kind of picking up where they need to and picking those contributions. And for the fact that Miller Walker did a pretty good job, all things considered, as the top pair. And, while Slavin is out, and that's still an impactful guy that you want to have in your lineup, but at least you kind of feel good as a defense. Like, even with the best defensive defenseman in the league out, you can still rely on the rest of your defensive core to do that. And I think that's what's something that a lot of people are kind of questioning coming into the season is how is it going to be, with a new guy in Miller who's coming over from the Rangers, has to learn the system, and Alexander Nikishin in his first full season on North American ice. How is he going to do? Well, Nikishin's already gotten a few assists under his belt, and Keandre Miller, while he didn't put up a point up, has been huge for the Hurricanes early on. It almost feels like that he kind of feels comfortable in the system, and it's only his third game with the team total. No preseason games, no nothing. I'm really liking what Miller's done so far for the Carolina Hurricanes, and I feel like that you could be looking at a Brady Shea 2.0 story where he has an okay career in the Rangers, but he comes over to Carolina and thrives. I know it's only 3 games in, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Keandre Miller, and the fact that you got him locked up for 8 seasons. And yes, I know it's $7.5 million. It's a little more than the Slavins, but hey, and of course, Slavin wanted to take that discount to build around him. But getting Miller for at that price for that many years, like I said, I know it's 3 games, but so far, pretty dang good investment for the Carolina Hurricanes to get a guy who's only 25 and already making contributions like that. And Sean Walker is showing why he took a step last year and why Rod Brind'Amour, really liked Walker's game as the season progressed last season to where he's at now. I think Walker's going to be a good fit as the right shot defenseman on that top pair, regardless if it's Miller or Slavin on that side. Depending on how long Slavin's out, if it's Miller Walker as that top defensive pair, I feel pretty good about it. So overall, great win for the Carolina Hurricanes. Like I said, you start the road trip 1-0, season's 3-0. You get that Wednesday night off, and then you're back at it again on Thursday against the Ducks. So you go from Northern California to Southern California. And now hopefully you get to kind of reverse the narrative from last year because it seemed like the Ducks had the Canes number last season. Now it's time to see if the Hurricanes can reverse. And, of course, we'll talk about that on the Thursday show as we run into the preview episode of that, talk about the Ducks. But, like I said, for this Wednesday show, you love to see what the Carolina Hurricanes did, and now they have started the season, like I said, 3-0, 1-0 on the road trip with a Brandon Bussi win in his debut. But until we talk about that Thursday game against the Ducks, this will be the Wednesday Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen. Your second listen, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, my one true Zach on X, the podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin. Where if you click screens of my bio, you can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. We've been putting out a lot of stuff recently, so make sure to keep an eye on all that as this season progresses. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Surge Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up so let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Canadians to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Wednesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.